am the only unbought and unbossed politician. Why should I step back?
This is UNBOUGHT Power Hour with Rasha Mubarak.
Hey!
How exciting!
How are you?
Good. How are you? I don't know how to
I'm fine.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I can totally see you. I do not have my generic, unfortunately. I thought we had some, but they were eaten up, as
You
is
know,
what
we ate
happens.
them all, and I was like, I don't know how to break the news to Maytha, so there's that. I guess we both are disappointing each other. How are you?
Fine. I don't know if you heard the news about what's projected to happen in Los Angeles.
No. Tell us.
So our chief around, I don't know if that's her technical title, but her name is Barbara Ferreri. She leads the public health department in Los Angeles, and she expects us to have shelter at home orders stay in effect through July.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's fine. Like, I have gotten used to this. It's not too much of a strain on me. I think more so the amount of work that people expect when you're at home and they think you're not doing anything. So they just want to pile more work your way. And they don't realize that some folks do actually still have jobs. And I don't mean that as a diss to anybody, but like having that and then having a lot of other requests come in feels cool to some degree, and not because the way that people see this new online space is very different than asking you to come and speak in person. And so that level of compensation isn't there. So, and some people are compensating for sure, but it's not the same thing because clearly it's not the same experience. So I get it. But
yeah,
I'm good. Alhamdulillah.
I got invited to be on a panel, and I was like, all right, you know, the whole point of UNBOUGHT Power is to make sure like you're getting paid for your work. But like as I began my LLC, it was just like right before this pandemic, and I was like, are you offering honorarium? Or when they're like, so sometimes it's like you don't get to what you don't ask for, so like the worst that can happen is no, and you still participate in a power panel, right? But like, yeah, I've definitely been feeling overwhelmed. I feel like obviously the nature of this work has always been full capacity, but like it's a whole nother level. Like I literally had kaleidoscope vision for the first time in my life yesterday. And I was
Wait, is that a term or is that real?
Yeah,
or is
like
that something you made up?
I Googled squiggly vision and it came up, and like alhamdulillah, like I have eye doctor friends, and they're like, we know you're not sleeping, you're fasting, you're overworking, you're on your devices, you're probably, you know, you're a new coffee drinker, so you need to chill and take it easy. But our governor
wait, back up. This might be a little bit more important than your governor. You're a new coffee drinker?
Yes. You know what induced it was 2018 Florida elections. That's what happened. I was in Miami a lot, so it was like no coffee, from straight no coffee to cortaditos to cortados. Like,
oh, that's a lot.
Cuban espressos.
See, this girl posts cortados all the time. Well, when we would go outside and have cafes.
Yeah.
When that was a thing, when people would sit and get coffees and things. And so I assumed you were part of this Arab diaspora of addicted coffee drinkers from when our parents thought it was cute to give us little sips of
I think I was fighting it for the longest time. And then I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, my parents drink like Arabic coffee at like 12 a.m. Like it's
that's what my mom does. Yeah.
And we have chai and all of that. Like I've always been like chai of nana. Hi, Sophie. But yeah, our governor's trying to kill us, unlike what's going on in California. We have a soft opening of phase 1, and it's like restaurants are open, but only 25% capacity. And it's like, what does that even mean, right? So I'm not going anywhere. I'm still mortified.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that it's interesting because there's like, it's a weird moment to see like right wing and left wing conspiracies
Mhm.
kind of try to manage the information that's swirling around, but leap to very different conclusions. So they think they're being attacked and their way of life is being disrupted, but it's people of color communities that are being overwhelmingly like actually attacked by the rates of COVID and the death tolls, and clearly police still policing mostly cash poor, working class people of color, and mostly for sure Black communities. And so it's really interesting that this far right thinks the conspiracy is against them and
It's crazy.
depopulation of their folks. But the funny part is that they will actually lead themselves to that depopulation that they
Right.
fear because of their drive and desire to get their hair colored or to buy more ammo. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But I
I
think
saw a
that,
news clip that it was like in Clearwater in Florida. There's like protesters. I'm all for protesting, right? Like practice free speech and whatever, but they were exercising outside the gym
oh, yes.
because they're
Yeah.
calling on it to open. And I was just like, this is people are literally losing lives, and this is where we are as a country. It's just
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but it's funny. So you can't take a knee, but like doing squats, coming in fully armed, that's what's really important.
right,
Or not even important. That's what is okay. That's what's
right.
permissible. Not the fact that this dude was just kneeling. But, you know, I'll say to them, if you don't like it, leave it. I mean, just leave. Not leave it. How many times have we both heard that?
Right.
How many
Too many
times?
times. Too
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
times. And I just think that like, I think
Oh, look at my sister. Sorry.
I was like, wait,
She
is that hi
she was
sister?
talking about my makeup. Yeah,
It does
Miriam.
look on
So,
point, like masha Allah.
well, she would do my makeup. That's why I had to point out to her because she's 10 years younger than me and she taught me how to put my makeup together. And
Oh,
this is actually her outfit that she gave to
it's
me.
super
So,
cute. You did good, sis.
I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you, but you were talking
No,
about,
I honestly like this is the first Unbought Power Hour, and like honestly, I couldn't think of anyone like better than to bring on to
oh,
be my first guest, especially like in this time. Like I found so much joy and peace in like our conversations and like
mm,
building this sisterhood, and like I obviously there's a lot of commonality, but something I always tell like community members is like I don't care what kind of platform you have as long as you're trying to achieve a better world and fight for equality and justice. And I think that you literally embody that on so many
oh,
levels. You're a professor, like you're a writer for Rami, like you do Wicked, like you do it on so many capacities, and you're still able to bring a social justice aspect to it. And I think is very important. And I want you to talk to that, and I want you to talk to how you're unbought in all of like your identities, because as you know, being a woman of color, Arab Muslim woman, and like how sometimes like even our diaspora, our fight, like you fight for the Palestinian cause, you've been to Palestine, you fought for the Black community, like even in progressive spaces it's easy to be marginalized or left behind. So I just want you to talk to like everything that you do and like how you've
wow.
been able to be unbought in the process of it all.
Wow. And I'm very honored to be your first guest. Like I said, I'm popping your generic, which is a little, like a very tart, tiny kind of apple looking, but it's not
Right.
fruit that we eat. You know how Latinx folks put a lot of like chili con limon on stuff? We put
Yeah.
salt on our fruits. So we
Right.
put like sea salt on it. But we were going to do that in honor of your Unbought Power Hour and bringing me on to
Right.
inaugurate it. And hi, folks. Zeki and a whole bunch of people
All
who
your
probably
people
are
are
from
there.
the
I love it.
um, I don't even know where to start, but I think for me, a lot of it is rooted in a radical vision of justice and freedom. And those words specifically, well, back up a little bit: justice, freedom, truth, love. Um, a lot of those things emerge from, I don't know. That's I think why I do a lot of spiritual work, is to figure out at what points did the did my commitment to truth telling, to freedom seeking, to dreaming something more just for all of us emerge, because there were little iterations along the way, but having a spiritual path gives you access to something beyond just the tale of our flesh bound life. It gives us access to the seen and unseen world, to multiple dimensions and livelihoods that our soul might have crossed around and through. And I know some Muslim folks who are traditionalists might dispute me on that, but I'm just so in a very vague way, I kind of set up that that I just have had that lens around justice and witness through around justice. So I'll step back. You know, in our faith tradition, witness is a big part of how we understand what is just and unjust. And it's told through so many different, not just only Quranic surahs and verses, but also in the Prophet's words and ways, which is called the Sunnah. And so what is compelled on the believer, or asked of the believer, is if you see an injustice and you are witness to it, you have to do everything in your power to testify to make the injustice just. And that's our profession of faith, is to say there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. There is no God but God. That I am witness to it. I am party to that. And so I guess sometimes you're driven towards a path without even having the words for it, and then you start studying and learning, and then those details and that texture of your life get colored in. And then you start to realize, oh, that's why I reacted as a child. I thought that was a tantrum, but I really hated that, like, really awful person's energy, or who that person was. I mean, I don't know. I might be making shit up too. Who knows?
No, that's real, though. That's real.
Because, you know, children have intuition on their fingertips, so they feel, and they emit that crying so good. Oh, thank you, Michael. So there's that. It's rooted in faith, justice, witness. Freedom is just something my spirit came into this world around. I feel so suffocated if there's any constriction around my ability to speak freely, my ability to express myself, and my ability to truth tell. And so that's what comes into the unbought hour, is that I've risked it for the truth in so many capacities of my life. But, you know, if you start to study history, truth makes you pay a heavy price. Right. Martin Luther King has this gorgeous quote that he gave in his 1967, April 4th, 1967, Why I Opposed the War in Vietnam address at the Riverside Church that people come together and commemorate every single year. And he says, truth, let me say this one second.
Take your time.
Freedom is the bonus that we receive for telling the truth. So while we sing these songs of freedom, we have to know that they can never emerge, they can never materialize until we make a commitment to truth telling. And that's difficult. Like, in this world, working in Hollywood, working in academia, especially academia, where people think
more than Hollywood? Talk to us.
It depends. So it again, very much different based on your positionality. I'm a woman of color who is a junior faculty member, so I came up against so much microaggressions, racism, gendered approaches to me. And also, again, because the power hierarchy is so rigid, not to say that this is not the case in Hollywood, it is incredibly difficult because that place professes to be the beacon of ideas, and especially departments that say they have a social justice, civic commitment. Those are the places that are the most disappointing because you have an expectation that they are going to fulfill the mission of their work, which is to interrogate the ways that there have been racial, gender, economic, social, political disparities between communities and try to right that wrong. But it just becomes, they just reproduce the same structures that have already existed. Like if you're the only woman of color in your department and you're trying to speak to a racist comment or
like you said, even microaggressions, that's like even so many layers to it, right? Like how do you even begin to like navigate that realm of like...
And if you're the only one, and that's the problem, like in most of these academic spaces, you are the only one. I was the only woman of color in my department. In a peace studies department.
That she's a woman of color professor in her entire school.
I was the only woman of color professor in my entire school.
Wow.
Did you guys just read that? Can you guess the percentage of women of color who are full professors?
I'm scared.
Across America. It might have changed, but I doubt that it's changed.
What is it? 3%? Stop!
2%. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so this will lead me into Hollywood. So this is the crazy part. I got my PhD at USC. There's a center there. Thank you. There's a center there in the Annenberg School of Communications that studies Hollywood and does a lot of research about the inequities around representation and behind the camera. Cool, fine, right? So they try to hold Hollywood accountable for fulfilling a much more diverse mission. However, when they put out those reports of this is the limited number, or this is the percentage of women who are directors, this is the percentage of people of color that are on this many shows, their own department's numbers are way worse than the got you numbers that they put out. So, but nobody calls them on that shit. So that tells you like about
the numbers.
Exactly, but nobody says, wow, this is the person producing this is a woman of color and she's the only woman of color in this department.
That's awesome.
No one's saying that, but they're saying, wow, look at how horrible these Hollywood numbers are. Okay, and that leads to Hollywood. Hollywood, yeah.
Wait, first give you a breakdown. Like, I'm sure a lot of folks already know, but like, you know, you're a writer for Dami, and this is your first experience doing that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I'm sorry, please interject because I am.
And season 2 comes out May 29th.
Look at that.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
And this is the season that you helped write for, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, look at how long this one is. What did somebody say? As a college student, I've noticed that while race and representation are the subjects of courses that energy hasn't been matched by the hiring of women of color and people of color. Yes. Well, I'll go back to that for a second.
By the way, but continue.
Love Rami. Can't wait for season 2. Yeah. So I'll go to Rami for a second because this is a very important point. If the students don't mobilize around this issue, unless there is really radical faculty, things will not change. Or unless somebody from the outside points a finger, things will not change. So there is a school that I helped start a social justice institute with called Occidental.
What?
And they have
they
have a very well organized, super social justice driven campus. And so I built up this institute, and it was to help students channel like social justice and understand practice and then professionalize themselves so they could have a career in social justice in the future. No, I didn't know that some of those students would come and be part of and leaders of organizing to take over the student affairs building. And they had about, I don't know, like 13, 15 demands. And one of their demands was that,
joined.
Hey, Aja. And one of their demands was that they wanted Black women hired for a professorship in African American studies and to create a couple more positions. And not only did they get that, they got every single one of their demands except the one that called for the president of the university to resign. So students, as I've constantly told my own, do not realize their power. And so I just give them examples of these other universities. But that's such a great point.
That's power.
Yeah. Thanks, Aja.
I miss you, Aja. Thanks for all your poetry. I can't wait for the 15th. I'm going to tune in. That's also my birthday. I share a birthday with Israel. But we appreciate you creating these spaces, Aja. You got to be one of my guests on here.
Yeah, for sure. So that's, I mean, there's so much to break down. Ramadan Mubarak, folks. I was the radical professor. My students organized the biggest protest in university history, but it was very unsafe situation for me.
Yeah,
that part. So that's the part. Like, we come in, and because it's such low numbers for people like us, we don't really have that many allies on campus. So we are either like on tenure track, pre-tenure, or we're contingent faculty. And contingent faculty means like adjunct lecturers. Very vulnerable. Absolutely. And so, but we're the ones that students turn to for emotional support, for project advisement, for everything. Slate put out an article about how the professor is the new therapist. And more than anybody, women of color are looked at, especially for their femme labor, to do that work. So yeah, my heart is out to you, Queen of Culture. And then Light Code, even when positions are created for Black, Indigenous, people of color faculty, there is rarely an intention to transform a culture of whiteness, right? Exactly. Mm-hmm. And people don't know what it takes to transform a culture of whiteness and white supremacy. And when it's so hierarchical, they don't want to take the advice of the woman of color who is junior faculty. So they think they're doing it. They think they're doing it right because they've read papers and they've maybe organized conferences on campus.
I can't even imagine just like the social, like, and I think like sometimes we forget just like the different layers of like white supremacy existence in like even academia, like that, just like how education is laid out for folks, and then just the hierarchy in like the professor. Like, I can't even imagine the stories that you must have from your day to day. Even like the other day, you were telling me about an email that like you received and how people craft their content and just the way that they propose, and like it's just for me, like I feel like the world I'm already trying to navigate is so intense, and I can't, like, I think we forget a lot of times how it happens in every like area of the like different departments in the world.
Yeah, it's funny. So I'm in peace studies, and I'll just tell you this quick story because it's a very good demonstration.
You can talk whatever you want to talk about.
It's a really great demonstration of how microaggressions play out, but they speak to a larger story of inequity and also assumed ability and assumed capability, right? So the day that our university got this email, really disruptive, at 12 p.m. stating, we are going to now transition from in-person classes to online, which was during that day. It was a Wednesday. It was in the middle of my classes. And so they called emergency department meetings. So I still had 2 more classes left for that day. But I thought, hey, if this is a big deal, I don't want to have my students go into a classroom when I have knowledge that it's not safe for them to be in the classroom. Because remember, in the beginning, before shelter at home, there were just so many stories. There were so many positions on and approaches about what we should do and how dangerous. People still didn't know how contagious coronavirus, COVID-19 was.
We thought we can hang out, like not touch each other or something.
Right. And so I just, there was the call for the department to meet up, and the department is kind of interdisciplinary. So people from other departments were also a part of it. And so I said, hey, I have 2 more classes left. Should I just cancel them and then try to go online after that? And so then a white professor responded with, as a responsible professor, I'm going to continue to teach my courses today.
Define responsibility to them, like, and what that actually
means. And responsible for them living instead of teaching something they're probably going to forget because they got this really
Yes, it was
disruptive
this past
email.
semester. Yeah, it was during coronavirus.
Yeah, it was during coronavirus. So then,
We lost you.
Latina.
Okay.
Oh, you can't hear me?
No, you're good now. Go ahead.
Okay. Latina, queer Latina in political science emailed me privately and she said, you are a, do not take anybody else's words on who or what you need to feel safe and secure and how you feel like your students. And that was great. And that was amazing. She's not in my department, but thank God I got that email because
there's
again,
like so much sense of security and community with other women of color that understand that, right? Like, I'm sure there's two of you or like three or like.
I mean, thankfully I had met her randomly at some other event. And so she knew who I was, this was my first year there. So she knew some of the fuck shit, but yeah. Anyways, I could definitely go into the Hollywood story too.
We're just interested in like how you continue to be unbought as you are like processing this world and the different capacities that you hold. I think it's inspiring and people need to hear it, that you can actually achieve like not being complicit, right? Some people think that they're in order to achieve some kind of freedom that we have to leave one community behind because then you're compromising, pathway to equality and equity for others. And reality is like, we're literally not going to see liberation for anyone if we start to process it that way. So I feel like you have been a person that has been grounded in your values and making sure that wherever you are, that you're exhibiting that. And I think it's important for people to hear.
Oh, thank you.
We just heard about like how you do it as a professor and with problematic, like white privileged, even like an email content that is just like triggering on a daily basis. So like, how do you do it in the Hollywood world?
Yeah.
And how have you been able to inject this social justice realm into it?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm born and raised in Southern California, in the suburbs of Los Angeles County, went to school for undergrad at UCLA. So we were literally in Westwood, where most of the film premieres are. There's a lot of filming also around UCLA's campus. But I never really thought about being involved in Hollywood, filmmaking, and doing television until these certain opportunities just manifested. And again, connected back to the spiritual work and the spiritual path, I take signs and I sit in front of them and I ask what this means and what is trying to be communicated. And in an effort to try to keep my ego in check and to see where I'm supposed to go.
Right.
And so it's weird to be somebody who knows LA outside of Hollywood and then to be brought in later in my adult life to doing that work. And I know a couple of people, same thing, like we could go our whole lives and not interact with Hollywood, being born and raised in LA. But I think that's also really great and grounding because most of the people who are transplants and come to Los Angeles for that industry, they need to live and die by it. And so fortunately, because I have my training and my hands in so many different fields, I don't need validation from Hollywood. I don't need to make it. And so I need to be committed and aligned with my truth, with my values. And that's what's most important. And so when I get folks who ask me, how did you get into this work? I want to copy it. I'm like, do you want to do
just don't
like
understand that like
the spiritual path? I take signs and I sit in front of them and I ask what this means and what is trying to be communicated. And in an effort to try to keep my ego in check and to see where I'm supposed to go.
Right.
And so it's weird to be somebody who knows LA outside of Hollywood and then to be brought in later in my adult life to doing that work. And I know a couple of people, same thing, like we could go our whole lives and not interact with Hollywood, being born and raised in LA. But I think that's also really great and grounding because most of the people who are transplants and come to Los Angeles for that industry, they need to live and die by it. And so fortunately, because I have my training and my hands in so many different fields, I don't need validation from Hollywood. I don't need to make it. And so I need to be committed and aligned with my truth, with my values. And that's what's most important. And so when I get folks who ask me, how did you get into this work? I want to copy it. I'm like, do you want to do
Just don't
like
understand that. Like, not even like, I'm like, it's
everybody, yeah. And there's little things that we can give people, but every path is different. And I have like decades of community organizing work, working in academia, doing journalism, and then coming
right.
to Hollywood with all of that is a completely different experience than.
But also, like, I feel like you organically are who you are because of like your own like authentic path into this work. You weren't planning on, you know, being in Hollywood, I'm sure, right? It was just because of like you being grounded in your values, it led you there. And it's like, and I always think like, it's like it's not about who is hyper, like famous, right? Or hyper, like there's this hyper social media or whatever it is. It's like, it's your work that has spoken for you and has led you to where you are today, right? And I think that it's important for people to understand. It's not that you're chasing a platform, but you look at it as like, okay, if I'm given another platform, that means more opportunity to inject my values and to do more of this work in a different and innovative way. And I think like, I imagine that's how you process it, right? So like, this is just another avenue to push like your belief and like fighting for freedom and justice in another way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I've been thinking about how Hollywood is a space to do the work that I do academically and scale it up. How to tell stories, how to put the intellectual rigor, but also give people a moment to pause and think about what they're seeing to try to establish some critical thought. But overlaying that with story and emotion moves people to another degree. So when I teach courses, we read narratives, we read poetry, we watch moving films. It can't only be about hardcore theory.
Right.
So the Hollywood story. I mean, I guess there are a couple ways to talk about this.
My friend's on there.
Oh, look at that. Hi, Lisa. I don't know you, but Rasha was just so happy to see you. I'm giving you that love. So I guess there's a couple ways to talk about this. One part of it was that during the 2015-2016, because the presidential campaign kind of started in 2015, there was a swell of support for Bernie from a lot of Hollywood type folks. And a lot of my friends were organizing for Bernie in Los Angeles. So there was overlap.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
Yeah. And there was a show that my friends were producing called My Peoples. That's what it was. Because there were two versions of it. I was like, what was it called? So anyways, you know, Dream Hampton, Erica Williams, Rosario Dawson, Brittany Estrada, and some other folks were involved in producing the show, which was interested in people like in our age group having conversations about politics, but there was also a focus on art. So there was the first taping of the show, and last minute, one guest pulled out. And so Dream messaged me and she's like, hey, can you get here in a couple of hours to fill in? And I was like, okay, sure, let me just do it. And so I knew one of the hosts who I had already named, Erica Williams, and Rosario was on that panel. And it's so funny because like almost everybody that I'd ever dated, like their celebrity crush was Rosario Dawson. And so I was like, here I am with like the person I couldn't live up to for my, no, I'm just playing, but the person that would get the pass in the relationship. So I speaking to the idea of like truth telling no matter what. So I go on and talk about things, and there were moments when people said things that weren't correct and I interrupted them, and then I put the context. And so what happened, and what happened afterwards, I guess I just kind of became this, I don't know, like sometimes people respond pretty well to being corrected in a graceful way, though. I've had
People
to learn
respect
that.
it. It's like almost like a Colin culture, like being put in your place, but like still uplifting them in a way, right?
Right. Well, also, do you want to continue to say things that aren't
Right.
true? And then you're going to be landing on your face, on your ass? No. So you want to, hey, Phil.
Right.
Um,
Hi,
so,
Phil, my friend.
so I just told people the things that they needed to complicate the story that they were trying to tell. And I think people appreciate that if they are seekers of truth, they're seekers of knowledge. And so I guess Rosario was really excited about what I
You know
offered.
what your stuff.
And so it was funny. There's this thing called Summit that had a conference in Tulum, Mexico, and she asked if I wanted to be on a panel with her there. So, like within a week and a half, I was in Tulum on a panel with her about
Wow.
transnational intersectionality, and I had been in conversation with her. And actually, Rami was on that panel
That's
too.
so
But I
fun.
had known Rami for a while.
Right.
So, anyways, I'm telling you this story because I want to demonstrate like there's this interesting synergy with the swelling of nationwide popularization of movement work that came about because of the presidential campaign, but also because of who got elected. And so that meant that Hollywood, more than ever, although Hollywood has been liberal and there have been people in Hollywood who have organized before, like Jane Fonda, Martin Sheen, tons of other folks. Somebody we should all like give love to, Donald Glover, who, yes, Harry Belafonte. So there have been people in this work. And but there was much more of a mass interest in it in this moment. So I kind of became like this dramaturge for celebrities. So I would like read things and I ended up in spaces with them. So I would help them figure out like how to say their message in a more thoughtful way. And I would shift things and edit and do a lot of ghost work. So I kind of became that thing for Rami. I had known Rami since he was 19. So this is Rami who is Rami Youssef, who won the Golden Globe for his show Rami. I became that when he started his stand-up career. And so he would come back to me and ask how he did. And at that point, I wasn't like really aware of the compliment sandwich. So I would just say it straight, like, okay, this is cool, but this is not how we would talk about Iraq. Or don't say like now the KKK just came back. They've always been here. You could say Nazis, although they've existed too. But here are some ways to make more sense of what you're saying, and maybe like it could be a little bit funnier.
Just like,
yeah, I guess that's the appropriate term from like the political consultant world. Yeah, messaging. I don't know. I mean, so in my mind, I know that I want to make everything that I touch better. Right. And so I want that for other people. And so we've spoken about, I've been doing that a lot and not getting paid and not getting compensated, but then getting to a point where now I've created boundaries and firm lines around that. So anyways, so he would keep me in his corner. And I came to a lot of his stand-up. I knew his routine by heart. I actually went to I was living in New York at the time. And when he was on Stephen Colbert, which was like his big breakout comedy moment, I was there in the audience, funny enough, sitting next to, what's her name? The woman who was Blossom.
That's so funny. I don't know her name, but
no, not her, but her family, because she was on the show that night. But we know they're hardcore Zionists, so it was like such a funny little combination that day. Anyways, so then, and Rami and I used to just like work and study buddy together, and he was drafting his pilot, let me see it, and I kept on giving him my notes over and over again. And then he got a development deal with Hulu for the season. So what happens is that a lot of people get picked up for their pilot, but that funnel between pilot to actually having a series and to getting a season is very, very narrow. So
I know folks that like have done that with Netflix, and like they fly them in and they have this whole thing and it doesn't go through.
Yeah, and then they might have an opportunity to develop something, but it just gets shelved or nothing ever happens. You know, Franklin Leonard
and they can never publish it, right? If that happens too.
I mean, it depends on what like
Right,
legal
contractual agreement.
so
Right.
things are. Yeah, exactly. So Franklin Leonard has something called the blacklist, which is trying to resuscitate those screenplays that got shelved,
Mm,
and they've put out like Academy Award winning films through this process. So anyway, so he like his first round is amazing. He gets tons of interest, and then Hulu gives him that pilot deal. And so I went back and forth with him, and then he gets picked up. And then I said to him, "Hey, Rami, I don't know what like the writers' room is like at all. I've never been in one, but I don't know. I don't know what you want my role for you to be, but tell me what sort of
right.
topics you're interested in, and let me see what I can do about it." So he gave me a list of themes that he was interested in exploring for the first season. And then I shot back with basically a syllabus. And so he would read something, we would meet, and it was a seminar style of
I
consultant
love
work. So it
that.
wasn't me, which was cool because I wasn't going to be in the room. So I didn't know how stories would evolve, how they would be shaped, and how much knowledge anybody else in the room
Right.
would have around this. And so after that, me and somebody else, his name is Azhar, were the creative art advisors for that season. Rami brought us in to season 2 in the room, and then I became a staff writer, and then I got signed to an agency, and I have a manager, and I'm pitching my own stuff
Oh
now.
my
So
God.
it's really, really cool. And I've been helping him with some of the social impact strategy around Rami and trying to figure out spaces for us to have the conversations about the themes, about the debates, about the questions in his show, because we're sitting and we're watching a lot, and we're in this binge culture of going from one show after another, and we don't have an opportunity to talk with somebody else or with the community to try to navigate all the feels. Because I know a lot of people got their feelings hurt or were very offended by the amount of sex that were in the
Okay,
show.
like I'm just me. Like I got DM'd like crazy, like either from the Muslims that were like upset about it, or like my friends that aren't practicing Muslims that were like using it as an Islam 101. And I was like, yo, like everybody needs to chill, like, you know, and it was hilarious. Like it was right after that Ramadan came about, and so many people came out to interfaith events because what they saw in Rami. They're like, are you gonna wash your feet now? Are you gonna pray now? And like referencing Rami. I mean, it was like I feel like it's a beautiful way for people to really understand that like we're human. And it's just like there's no like homogeneity of who Muslims are and what they look
Yes.
like and act like,
Yeah.
how they practice, right?
Well, so a couple of things. One is that, yes, the homogeneity is not there, and which is amazing because we don't have to feel the pressure of fitting into Rami's storytelling of his vantage point of what it means to be an Egyptian Muslim in Jersey. And that's the thing that I really try to impress upon him from Jump, which is
Right.
that they're going to try to slip this label of first Muslim to on you, and
Mm-hmm.
then Muslim blank. You don't want that. You want to be able to say, I'm telling this very specific story, and in rooting in the specificity, that's how your story is going to be more universal. That's how
And
your
the name
story is
of
going
the
to
show,
emotionally resonate.
Rami.
Yes, exactly. The show is called Rami. But also, what I love about what he does that might offend people is he says the characters meet at the fault lines. So he wants to explore all the inner turmoil, all the things that we might not want to expose, this thing in our culture of what will people say if they find out. And I always hear him like,
But like, you know
you're,
what's
you're from
crazy,
what?
May? Like, is that I feel like every episode because in the community, like people approach you with all these different issues, and like you learn about these issues. So like all of those are very real. Like
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like in
Right. The thing that people really had a deep issue with was the episode about Ramadan, and sorry, spoiler alert, the fact that he sleeps with a married woman who has a headscarf who meets at the mosque. And I
yeah.
mean, it's after Maghrib, but I mean,
That's a very
They,
good story though. Like,
but, and most folks who approach me about it said, this is like unbelievable. This would never happen.
stop.
I'm like, you must not go to the masjid. You must have no idea about the Muslim community because there are some, you know, like very
These
tabloidy
things
stories.
happen. This is like human
Yeah.
nature. Like it's especially the homegirl was vulnerable.
Homegirl was vulnerable. Homegirl was felt unloved.
Right.
Did not have attention. Had attention from this young, you know, nice bearded dude.
Right. I cared about her in the, you know, and I think, I mean, that's a whole nother thing, but it's real. Is like a lot of, you know, in our culture, whether it's the Islamic culture, like tradition of other, like Arab culture, South Asian, Black, whatever it is, it's like they're sometimes women, and I think a lot of our communities are looking for love and the marriage that they might not find, and it's like they find it in different forms.
This leads to one of my favorite episodes from season 1, which was the one with Hiam Abbas, who plays Maytha, the mother, and her story.
That hurt me.
Yeah, but it's a story that a lot of us who have immigrant mothers who came here were uprooted,
right,
and pulled out from the roots of community,
right,
and then have a partner who's working all day, children gone to school or working also.
Yeah, it's so
where's their love from community, from their family, and exactly what you were saying, what's that story look like? And so we got a glimpse into that world, and I thought that was such a beautiful episode.
I think one of the, you know, it definitely was, and that one was, it was painful to watch just because of how real and how so many cases of that. I think one of the episodes, and I don't want to take us back too far, but like one of the episodes that resonated with me was when he went to Egypt.
Oh yeah.
I want to learn about the revolution, and like I want to be a super Muslim, and it's like it reminded me of me when I would go to Palestine, and I'm like, I need to volunteer in here and volunteer there, and my cousins are like, you're so cute. And I was like, why? And they're like, you want Hadari Palestine? You want to free us? Like, and my cousin would be like, we just want to have like a crush in university. Like, we just want to live normal lives. And it's like, so that one I think resonated a lot with me. So, but
yeah, I mean, it was also this weird world of being in between and trying to reconnect with family. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And then Rami's comedic spin on top of that as well, which is there are some conservative people in our community that probably not in Palestine, but in other places were like, yeah, Trump, he's serving America well. Well, but you know, like some segments of the Arab world are also getting very anti-Palestinian, unfortunately, because of alliances with this regime.
And that's why we have shows like Rami to bring light to it. And I think that there's you come in, right? Is that you speak of the social impact and like just like how to talk about these issues in this way.
Yeah, let me give you an example of what happened and came out of one of the articles that I sent him from our seminar, so you guys can understand how you move from like research to filmmaking to storytelling to filmmaking. So there's an episode about 9/11. You remember that one? Yes, when he's a kid. And there's a surprise guest at the end who is trying to convince Rami that the U.S.
in his dream, right? Like
in his dream, yes. Who, by the way, I think is played by a white dude, which is funny. But so again, spoiler alert. Kind of, maybe. I'm not going to give you the full story. But he tries to lure Rami into his cause by stating some things that actually really happened to Egypt, which was that, he holds up a strawberry, and the episode is called Strawberries. And he says, look what happened to Egypt. They were forced to take their wheat fields that were used for feeding the population domestically and to convert them for strawberries to sell to the West. so that people in the West could have strawberries in winter. That's what they've done to us. Like, we're starving, we're hungry. And that's an actual true story. The
Wow.
IMF made that stipulation in their structural adjustment program
Wow.
that in order to get this loan, you have to convert these wheat fields that are used to feed your population to export strawberries to the West. So,
Sorry,
yeah.
come on, Bass.
Abbas, hey, how you doing? Yeah. What was I gonna say? Yeah, so that's an example. And then now in season 2, which we're just a couple weeks away from, it's been so amazing to be in a room for the first time. I like to say, this is what I told Rami, it felt like because he brought in writers who had like decades under their belts, being showrunners in the room, that it felt like I was getting paid to take a master class in screenwriting. And so, this is the other funny part of the story. So somebody who's one of my closest friends in life, Patrice Cullors, also had a very similar trajectory to me around the same exact timeline. So she was consulting on a show called Good Trouble for Freeform. They wanted to have a Black Lives Matter storyline, and the showrunner read her memoir and brought her on to consult. And so Patrice, doing her magic, like brings the actual organizers to be part of the characters. And then so she's consulting and I'm consulting on the season 1, and then we get brought in at the same time for the next season's room. So we're sharing stories with each other, like we're breaking story. What are some other words that you've heard? Well, this is what they mean when they're saying we got to hit this beat. So we were just like trying to figure out some of the language in the room.
I love that.
Oh, Sahar. Yeah, Good Trouble. I mean, the magic hands of a lot of the work of Patrice is so evident in that show. And then there's this amazing final that they have where they celebrate Black joy and trap heels, and trap heels music. And I was on set when they did it. Well, one day on set, and it was so gorgeous. I told them, this is like a museum exhibit, you guys. Like, they made original artwork for that final. And similarly, like, so the news has already been dropped for season 2. Mahershala Ali is coming on as a character in the show. And watching him, so I went on set, and watching him act was a marvel. Like, there's no words to capture how amazing he is, and just so genuine and lovely. When he found out I was a writer, he was like, "Oh my God, thank you for your words."
That's
and
beautiful.
It's also, yeah,
it sounds
and it's
like
also
a community, right? Like you've all built a sense of community even off the set, and that translate into all of our computer and TV screens, right?
Yeah. I mean, and it's great too, because you get to see what ways you can craft and narrate stories based on, I have a pretty eccentric life, from some of the things that have happened in my life. Right. You'll get to see in one of the episodes I've written.
Oh my gosh, is it like it's one of your stories, like your real stories?
Kind of, like a little capture of it. I mean, there are parts of it that are displayed,
right? Like a different version of it or something.
Rami said something when he was doing promo for the show that people asked him, "Is this your story?" And he said, "Well, it's like emotionally true. Like, it's an autobiography in an emotional sense." And I thought that was so powerful.
Asked him, I'm like, what about this episode? Is this really?
Are these little details? I mean, the thing, if you guys want like a snapshot, that part,
but yeah, basically that's how he was answering.
Yeah. But also, like, if you want to understand how he has constructed a lot of his stories, there are some things that like did happen that he takes to either an extreme or leads it on a path that would allow people to have a little bit more of a question around it, or ask people to sit with it a little bit longer. But also, like, if you follow his stand-up comedy, you'll see some of the bits, like, are setups for some of the moments in the show. So, yeah.
You're going to talk about, like, the episode that you wrote, or I don't know if you wanted to get into that, but, like, probably you can't, but.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what I can say. And
I'm not trying to, like, Rami, like, pops up on our IG, like, what are y'all doing? But
yeah, exactly. Yeah. What can I say? I can say that it's an interesting process. So Rami, okay, let me start back. Every writer's room can be different.
mhm,
And so his room was very much him being in the room and us shooting the shit, but building out arcs, building out characters, asking questions. I mean, that's sometimes the most important part of
right.
breaking story is asking, is this like somebody would do? Or what's the next thing that would happen? What's real? What feels like very um, overwritten? Um, and then he would work with another writer and then put a story together, and then we go back and forth around dialogue and components. So um, when they were taping it, there were also last minute changes. That's what I realized as well, that like it's crazy to see the discussions that happen in the writer's room, the way that they are developed. And then once it migrates to set, there are some things we don't consider. The fact that they're filming in New York in January. There's some shots that they have like an hour to capture because there's a snowstorm that's about to happen. Somebody asked where you can find Good Trouble. It's on Freeform. And Freeform, I believe, is Disney owned, so it might be there. But I think Freeform is also free. So if you just download the app and you'll be able to see it. So for my episode, we just thought about like a completely new direction we were going to take because something just didn't fit with some part of the story. And after the episode drops, I'll explain
Okay.
what happened and what didn't. Oh, Sahar saying Hulu has it as well. And Hulu is where Rami's show is at as well. Yeah. So yeah, that's the story. And I'm sitting and trying to write some stuff and pitching. And I'm telling you, there's some really exciting projects that are coming out. There's some things that are still problematic. There's some things that are still almost there, but not there. But when you have the background, and I'm not just saying like being the person, being the Syrian,
Right.
being the Muslim, but somebody who does work in these communities, then you have a lot more of a stake in how that story is told. And there's a lot more confidence for your ability to tell those stories.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So we're grateful that people like you and Rami are there to really help craft the narrative and tell our stories versus people that aren't from our community trying to create a narrative for us. So.
And it happens. So it's like it's interesting.
Did you see?
I
I saw something on TikTok. I mean, I saw something on TikTok that was like, I don't know what show it was, but the girl went to pray and she was like,
I have to go into that.
What?
I forgot to say, I completely forgot to say that I wrote this report called Huck in Hollywood when I was a senior fellow for Pop Culture Collaborative. Huck, like Huck. Truth and Hollywood. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Huck in Hollywood. I love that so much.
And it's 100 years of Muslim tropes and traps and how to transform them. So I go over the 100-year history of how we've been represented as Muslims and in so many different racial categories, how Black Muslims are represented pre 9/11, very different than post, very different than pre-Arabs, very different than Latinx community, which does not get represented at all.
Right.
So anyways, I was like so enraged that this story comes out after my report does.
Oh my God, it's going to cut us off in 2 minutes, by the way.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So it's called 911 Lone Star. And this is like one of those spin-off shows. And this woman is Arab Christian. And they have somebody else who's some sort of Middle Eastern like co-EP on the show. Sure. But yeah, she literally has her headscarf come off when she's trying to save somebody, and she has bouncy curls come down afterwards. And then her praying,
right?
Yeah, her praying is like her hands are glued to her quads, and she's trying to go down.
Christian in the show?
No, no. She is an Arab Christian. Okay. But for people, they think, oh, since they're Christian, they're Arab, they know exactly how to pray.
So bizarre.
Yeah.
So
So I don't want to take away the couple of
no, I
seconds,
want you
but
to like, you have 1 minute, and I just want you to like, just your last thoughts and advice on people, wherever field they've taken on or work, how to continue to be unbought in this work, and like what you've found to be helpful.
you are advising one of the most unbought people in the national stage of America. So I sit and I learn from you all. But I would say that truth for me always wins out. It's just really about how that truth is told. And there is an artful way to be rooted in truth, to express it, and to also be patient when things are not unfolding. But as Ibn Arabi talks about, I'm committed to authentic self-revealing, and I'm still a seeker on that path. So if you guys want to join that path, come along.